To sew this, I'll be using these sewing supplies. I have my curve rulers, my scissors, my pencils and marker, and my tracing wheel. This tracing wheel will be very important, and of course calculator. Here I have the fabric I'm using. I have satin here. That's what I'll be using for this. You can use crepe or chiffon to make this. I'll set this aside. Here I have my pattern paper, and we're going to be using pattern paper for this. I folded my pattern paper into two like this, as you can see. So one is going to be for front and one is going to be for the back. So just know anyone can be for the front, but I'm going to be using this side for the front. I'll be using for this sewing tutorial a bust 34 inches, waist 28, hips 38, dress length 39, and armhole length 8 inches. I'll be starting my measurement from this line that I have squared out. So I'll be starting by taking out the 5 inches that is for the spaghetti strap. So I'll start from this line that I have made here, and I'm going to take all the lines down. First I have my armhole length, which is 8 inches, my waist length 17.5 inches, my hip line is 25 inches, and then the dress length is 38. At the end of the dress I'll be adding 1 inch hemming allowance, so I'll mark 39 inches first, and then I'll add 1 inch for the sewing allowance, for the hemming allowance, sorry. So I'll square out all these lines. So let me go through the lines again. This is the armhole line, the waist line, the hip line, and the dress length, and I have added 1 inch hemming allowance for the dress. Next, on this armhole line, I'm going to divide the bust measurements, round the bust measurements divided by 4. So we have the circumference of the bust as 34. I'll divide that by 30. Divide it by 4. What we get is 8.5, and I'm going to add ½ inch sewing allowance to that, and I'll mark it there. Next, on the waistline, the waistline we have is 28 inches. So I'm also going to do the same thing, 28 inches divided by 4. I'm doing it like this so that any beginner will understand. So 28 inches divided by 4 will give me 7 inches. I'll mark the 7 inches there like that, and I'm going to add ½ inch sewing allowance to that. So you go ahead and add ½ inch sewing allowance. Also to the hip line, I will do the same thing, hips divided by 4. The hips we are using is 38 inches. We are going to divide that by 4, which will give us 9.5. You can see 9.5. I'm going to mark it there, and I'm going to also add ½ inch sewing allowance there. Remember, I haven't added any easing allowance. So here I'm going to come down by 3 inches. That is to mark for my hip curve. So I'm going to taper the hem line by 1 inch. So whatever I have at the hip line, I'm going to remove 1 inch. First of all, I'm going to connect this line here. So here I'm going to come in here by 1 inch. So whatever I have on my hips, I'm going to remove 1, which is 10 inches. If I remove 1, it's going to be 9 inches. I'll mark it here, and I'm going to make the curve, the pencil line, pencil skirt line. So just go ahead and do the same thing I'm doing here. I'll go ahead and connect all the side seams. I'll go ahead and highlight all these lines with my marker in case you're not seeing them. Next, for the front neckline, I'm going to make it 4 inches. I added ½ inch sewing allowance, which is 4.5. I'll go ahead and connect this to the armhole line with my curved ruler. So this line would be for the neckline, the front neckline. I'm going to mark the back neckline. So just drop it down below the armhole and give it a nice curve. So I'm going to go ahead and trace off that. I'll trace it off so that it will appear on my other pattern paper for the back. I'm just going to go ahead and trace out all the lines so that I will mark them on my back panel. And then I'll go ahead and cut out all these places. So you just go ahead and cut them. Remember, we have added sewing allowances to all this. So I'll just go ahead and fold away this where I started, because I'm not going to be adding any sewing allowance to the front neckline. I'll add ½ inch sewing allowance to the back neckline. So that's what I'm tracing so that it will appear on the back pattern.
So many times that I miss you. I know how to call when I want to. Now you got way bigger issues.
I went ahead to cut out the front and the back just to separate them. So I'm just going to cut off the neckline of the front on the back panel. Remember, there was something I cut out. I'm just going to replace it so that I don't have any shortage there. So I'll just go ahead and mark all the lines that I have on my front, the same line I used the tracing wheel to make. So I'll just go ahead and mark them out. Now over to the cowl neckline. On the hips line, this hips line, I'm just going to cut this open, and I'm going to open out for the cowl neckline. So you just go ahead and open out at least 3.5 inches for the cowl neckline. Remember, the more you open it, the more lower it gets, and it's already a spaghetti, so it's low already. So don't don't make it too low. So I'm just going to follow here and make a square from the armhole line. Hope you guys are seeing what I'm doing. So from that armhole line, I made a square. I squared that line. So I'm just going to fold this in to get the facing for the front. You just make sure the facing would go below the armhole line. I just went ahead to cut this out. So I just made my pattern straight so that that neckline is straight on the cowl neckline. So this is the front of the cowl neckline. Can you see the facing? So I'll go ahead and bring the back pattern. So can you see, guys? This is what we have. In the next video, I'll be showing you guys how to sew this. For today is a pattern drafting tutorial. Bye.